This is Bread and Burgers, two everyday burger fanatics in pursuit of that perfect burger.
Join Jon and Jonas as they explore all there is about this tasty treat and deconstruct everything from bun to bun.
We hope you enjoy this discussion about burgers and everything life. All right, hey everyone, welcome back to Bread and Burgers. We're so glad that you're joining us for another conversation about burgers and everything life. We hope you've been enjoying our conversation so far, and I certainly have. And John, hopefully you're having a good time here too.
No, I hate it. No. You see my grin because Jonas finally got the intro right. So, we can get our merch going.
It means we're doing something right.
World domination. Yeah.
So, so we've kind of gone through a lot about, burgers and stuff that's going on. But yeah, before we jump into what we're going to talk about today, how have things been going for you? I hear quarantine may be ending soon? Question mark?
It's a toss-up, right? I mean, it's the 6 counties of the Bay Area is kind of banding together and saying that they're going to extend a little bit longer than the state. LA is projected to continue until July. So, there's a lot of like these weird kind of Twilight Zoney things that's going to happen. And then again, I'm okay with that. It's just confusing sometimes, especially when the county government and local governments are the ones that are making the recommendations. So then one county can have different rules than the other, which kind of happened during Mother's Day, where I think it was San Francisco, where flower shops were not opened, and yet another county, flower shops were opened. So it kind of got messy. Are they violating rules when they deliver, or how things are going? So it's a bit of it's a weird mess. I won't say it's a bad mess. It's a weird mess.
Sure. Yeah, here things are sort of amorphous. I think our governor wants to do in Massachusetts kind of this like 4-phase plan where you slowly bring people back to work, but I guess it's pretty ambiguous still, like what is considered going to be a phase 1 industry and what's going to be a phase 2 industry. And for me personally, right, like working at church, even if church starts again, they're recommending sort of these like kind of distance marker kind of things, right? Like you can't be within 6 feet of another person kind of thing. And so
yeah
for like a congregation, that's kind of like, oh, does that mean we start assigned seatings? We go back to like the Puritan, you have your own pew kind of thing.
Hey sir, you're in my seat. Yeah. I mean, it's weird. In California, it hasn't been talked about, and of course, being California, there's so much more important things than like religious life, right? Tongue in cheek, but at the same time, it is. You kind of see that people are looking for genuine connections, looking for things that kind of define their normalcy before the whole this pandemic. But at the same time, that's not going to happen. Based on just what we see, it's hard to fathom what we need to do, and in terms of the timeline, well, restaurants obviously go first, and then there's like retail and everything, and overall the state or the county governments have somewhat neglected the religious communities. So yeah, it's a bit of a toss up for us too.
All right.
Yeah. That's just life.
All right. It's good to hear.
Yeah.
All right. So this week we're just gonna jump right into it.
Are you like looking at your notes?
Yeah. I just want to make sure I get it right. Spent too much time practicing that intro. So this week, what we want to jump into, we want to talk about are kind of like burger adjacent kind of things. Like they may be a burger, might not be a burger. I think John and I kind of approached this from a couple of different perspectives. So one perspective you might think about it is like just the broad category of like, is this a burger? And we'll
Hmm.
talk about some of those. I think for me, like another category that I could go through to is like, well, for me, I'm thinking of it a little more pragmatically in the sense of like, I have all this burger stuff left over, and maybe I'm out of like buns, but I still have like a ton of meat and onions and whatever left. What do I do with it, kind of thing?
Hmm.
What are some options that are kind of burger inspired or burger adjacent? So we're gonna go through
Yeah,
that.
I call it the honorable mentions, right? Because again, it's we have kind of a set and strict definition of a burger. Then hey, what about the other stuff? Chicken sandwich. Just kidding. We
Sure.
we kind of talked about it, but at the same time, in terms of lists, right? We don't have too much yet.
Yeah, so the big ones we've kind of mentioned already, right? Like John is pretty vehement on this. It would be say like patty melts, right? Any sort of burger that is on sliced bread.
Yeah. Again, I can have different breads. Our bun episode. Check out episode 9. Our burger bun episode. We talked about it. But ultimately, sliced bread, even like Texas toast, inch and a half kind of thick toast is still not a burger bun, and it's more of a sandwich. To me.
Yeah, so most famously, where you can see this, a lot of pubs they sell patty melts, and the traditional patty melt would be basically, um, it's basically a Reuben with a burger patty instead of
But
pastrami.
then at the same time, don't want to dive in this too much, but there are Rubens that are made with like Dutch Crunch, other like rolls, hoagie
Right.
rolls, like so that's hard too, right? But again, if we're talking about
Mm-hmm.
traditional Reuben where it's like sliced bread or toasted sliced bread, but then for a patty
Right.
melt, a patty and cheese, then yeah, you know, it's close enough to a burger.
Yeah, burger adjacent. If you really want to try one out there, it's not exactly a patty melt, but if you ever go to the Habit, get it. Ask for the Santa Barbara style, and that's kind of what we're
And
talking about.
fair point. There's if the burger bun is about there's a dome shape, there's a bottom. It's a little bit more softer than the toast or bread. You might want to have the normal sliced bread just because you want a little bit more crunch, right? Again, the same rules apply. You don't want a soggy bread, right? A soggy slice of bread.
Hmm.
Most of the time when we're talking about patty melts, the bread is toasted like fairly, golden, with a bit of crunch, right? So
I mean, it's the
yeah,
the
yeah,
bread is grilled, right? The entire
right.
sandwich is
So I
grilled.
mean, there's that textural difference compared to a burger, let's say.
Right. So one of the things that I used to like that I consider very, very burger adjacent is I used to go to this deli up in Seattle, and they had something they called the chopped
Okay,
steak sandwich.
okay,
And the best way that I can describe it is it's served on like a
okay.
hoagie roll, right, or one of those sandwich rolls. So immediately it's more of like a sub than it is like a burger. But the chopped steak is essentially just
Hmm.
ground beef formed into a slightly different shape, right? And so the best way I could describe it is like if you take like the Subway
Mm.
chicken breast, they have those chicken breast kind
Chicken
of
breast. I'm
like
just kidding.
nugget
Yeah.
square things. Yeah, like kind of the hash brown shaped chicken breast, and you just make that with ground beef, and then you put it on, a sandwich with lettuce, tomatoes, maybe some vinaigrette or whatever. Like you're basically making Subway with
Hmm.
ground beef. So that would be like my honorable mention. Very, very burger adjacent.
Okay, okay. So what are the fixings in it?
It would be basically what you have in your typical deli, right? You have cheese, lettuce, tomatoes. Um, Maybe you can add some like pickles. mayo, mustard,
Okay,
that
so
sort
it's
of
like a
thing.
deli sandwich. I mean, it's more of a cousin of
Right.
a deli sandwich than say a burger, right?
It's kind of halfway in between, right? Like it's basically imagine if Subway sold, like oblong burger
Got it.
patties.
Okay. Well, and where is that? Where would you have it?
I had this in it was a deli in Seattle. I like this mom and pop shop up in the Northgate area of Seattle. I'm not sure if it's still
Okay.
there.
Well, let me ask you this. For my first honorable mention, kind of burger esque, sandwich, I would
Hmm.
have to say a sloppy Joe. What are your thoughts on that?
Okay. I can kind of buy that. Sloppy Joes are one of those things where like I have a lot of burger ingredients and I don't want to make burgers, right? Like to me there's a sense of like um there's a sense of cuz the way you make sloppy joes is very similar to how you would make
Yep.
like taco meat. The process, right? You're just browning beef and then you're
Yeah.
adding seasoning. And so there's a sense where I can kind of tongue in cheek say like a sloppy joe is basically the burger for people who are too lazy to make patties.
Okay. Okay. I can see that.
But there is a fundamental difference to browning and
Yeah.
grilling. Um, and so that's sort of the difference. And so the sloppy joe is you're kind of emphasizing the sauce a little
Yeah,
more,
I mean,
sort of thing.
a traditional sloppy Joe would be, burger bun. You would have loose ground beef, kind of cooked and simmered
Hmm.
inside that sauce, that kind of sweet and tangy, sometimes ketchupy or barbecue sauce type, meat sauce. But of course, that can vary. And you plop it onto your burger bun, and that's about it, right? Of course, you can have a little bit of
Right.
lettuce, it may be, but traditionally you just kind of have your sandwich. So to
Yeah.
me, the reason why there are two reasons why a sloppy Joe really isn't a burger. Of course, one, you already said it, that you're working with ground meats or ground beef, sometimes pork actually, and it's not formed together like a patty, right? And the second thing is,
Hmm.
correct me if I'm wrong, everybody, but there are limited fixings or condiment kind of varieties for a sloppy Joe. Like, you think so?
I mean, a sloppy Joe inherently is the base sloppy Joe is
Right.
three ingredients, right? Which are incidentally the same three ingredients for like sweet and sour chicken, but it's ketchup,
Right.
vinegar, and sugar um, that you use, and so you're mixing all of those condiments in already, and so there's a lot of like it's the sauce that kind of gets
Right.
emphasized, right? And so um, to kind of maybe is a good segue, but a good like to me, there's a sense that a sloppy Joe is essentially like an ultimately simplified version of like chili.
Yes, yes, and then you use the burger bun as the vehicle of eating it, right?
Right. And so like if you made like a really good chili and like put it on a burger bun, it's kind of like a glorified sloppy joe. The main difference being that because it is mostly like sugar and the beef oil fat with the vinegar and and the ketchup is it tends to be a little thicker, hopefully, and the beef fat from the browning beef ground beef will kind of emulsify that sauce and make it not runny like a soup. In which case, sometimes
Yeah.
chilies
And
can
and
be.
I remember actually back in college where we had this phase where we were eating sloppy joes. Of course, the sauce from a can, and then we would just buy like ground beef or ground pork, and then do it that way.
Hmm.
I don't know why we never really kind of dove into like actually making a burger instead. One thing is because we don't have a patio where we lived. There is one, but it's all awkward and disgusting. So we didn't have like a
Hmm.
little
Hmm.
patio to grill the burgers, and then we just didn't want to destroy our kitchen. Um, so yeah, like we would have sloppy joes, and probably just the easiest kind of, you know, college food.
Yeah, I think sloppy joe's the other benefit is, like any sort of like kind of bulk things you can make in bulk, right? It's also easier to store. You don't have to make all the patties in advance and then
Right.
store them. It's just sort of you heat it up and however much you eat, and then you just put the rest in like a Tupperware and you store it. And so, in that sense, sloppy joes, like unless you've already put the meat on the bun, sloppy joes are very very, like they last a
Yeah, that
long
said, I
time,
wonder if
in a
it
sense.
would work this way where you would have a sloppy Joe slider, right? I've never seen one made.
I feel like, to me, there's a certain aspect of it where like I could see that being a thing, but at the same time, the amount of I feel like for just that little bite, it's not like super super worth it. Just for
Come
like a
on,
sloppy Joe, it
sliders are the same
feels.
way, right?
Yeah, but just like I don't know, just it feels like you're never only gonna have one,
Like a
and then
slider.
so like you do the extra work of like pulling apart all the slider buns and that sort of thing. I don't know. It's just something kind of, I guess, visceral and I guess maybe nostalgic about, a slightly oversized hamburger bun, like a Whopper sized hamburger bun with like, like this weird chili stuff
Okay,
dripping out
fair
of it.
enough. So go back to Jonas's point about browning versus kind of grilling, or kind of browning the sloppy Joe meat versus like actually like having a sear on the burger patty. It is quite different, right? Because you have your burger patty formed, you season it with the purists would say salt only, but salt, black pepper, or sometimes a little bit of sugar as well, and then you actually let that crust develop, and the crust is really different in texture than your meat inside, right? So if you will, cooking it medium or medium rare or pink, a little pink, then you would have your crust kind of like thick and crusty and crunchy, and then you have your kind of the gray parts where it's cooked, a little bit more chewy, and then you have your softer bits in the middle that's pink. That to me is what I would kind of on average define what a burger patty is, versus the sloppy Joe meat is just soupy or saucy grilled or saucy kind of browned, you know, beef.
Yeah, essentially the cooking is inherently different, right? Like even at the highest heat, the amount of meat that you're putting into the pan, especially loose ground beef, right? And anytime with loose ground beef, you're getting that char. You're trying you get like kind of that burger char. It means you're burning your meat. And so with loose ground beef, essentially all you're doing when you're browning is like you're poaching it in its own fat.
And that's a funny thing because like I forget exactly who. Oh, I remember. It was about the Ogana Coffee, a fellow YouTuber,
Hmm.
and barista, like like master, James Hoffman was saying that, well, okay, so the whole Dalgona coffee, the 400 times coffee, is a preparation method, not you're not transforming the ingredients, you're only doing it differently in preparing it. But the funny thing is, difference here, the sloppy Joe and also burger, in a way, it's actually different based on a preparation method, and yet the results vary so much. Just because one, you form it and then you cook it, or two, you don't form it and you throw it into the pan and you brown it that way, right?
Yeah, I think when it comes to like, especially like cooking meats, I think the form and how you cook it very much drastically change your final product and how you approach it, right? And this is true for, I would argue, any sort of heavy
Mm-hmm.
protein, right? Like it's one thing, you get one flavor if you slice up a chicken breast and you stir fry it in a super high heat with oil versus if you pan fry it versus if you stick it in an oven and bake it. And we're not even talking
Yeah.
seasoning yet, right? And already there's a visceral difference
Yeah,
between all
that
three
might
of
be a future
those.
episode about how different preparation methods of burgers or even burger like ground beef can affect what it is, the definition of it, right?
Yeah,
But anyway,
yeah.
so
It's almost like an
yeah.
extra ingredient.
But anyway, kind of going back to our list of honorable mentions, burger like
Mm-hmm.
sandwiches. I had a long conversation with my coworkers before about the Philly cheesesteak. And even in the Philly cheesesteak camp,
Okay,
there is Philly cheesesteak,
sure,
and then there's also a Philly cheesesteak style sandwich, right? So, like, shots fired there.
sure.
But the Philly cheesesteak, what are your thoughts first? Like, what is a Philly cheesesteak?
I think for me, the biggest thing about a Philly cheesesteak specifically is that it needs to be it's a
Okay.
leaner meat and it's like a shredded steak, right? And so I would personally be very skeptical or even disappointed, right, to get like a Philly cheesesteak made out of ground
Okay.
beef.
Okay.
Like if I got a Philly cheesesteak made out of ground beef, I'd be like, "What is this? Is this like are you trying to do like nachos on a
See,
bun?"
that's the thing because I've actually had Philly cheesesteak, usually on a hoagie, a hoagie kind of sandwich roll,
Right?
and there
Mm-hmm.
are varieties, right? I've had
Mm-hmm.
sliced thinly sliced, beef. I've had ground beef, and then I've also had like steaks, like tiny little, how like fajita steaks, if you will,
Sure.
and all of them
Sure.
call themselves, again, note, call themselves Philly cheesesteaks, but not the Philly cheesesteak itself.
Yeah, I think for me, I'm always a little leery of what sometimes these restaurants call their own thing foods, and maybe this is because I eat at like Chinese restaurants a lot, and they call themselves kind of whatever, and you know, it's just kind of it's their idea of what a Philly cheesesteak is and therefore kind of imposing it on it, right? I had a friend who lived in Idaho for a long time, and well, not a long time, but he lived in Idaho for a little bit, and he said there's no Chinese food there, and the reason being because like it's hard to
Hmm.
source ingredients, and basically there used to be a Chinatown there, and the Chinese people would source ingredients, like just local ingredients to just kind of and makeshift kind of
Yeah.
Chinese food, right? And that's what the locals thought was Chinese food. And so when the Chinatown kind of collapsed, the locals were like, "Well, that's Chinese food," and so in order to keep it going, that's what we're gonna make, and that's what we call
Yeah, and,
Chinese
and, and
food.
truthfully, again, I'll go back to the Philly cheesesteak in a little bit, but it's in some ways it's the same for Panda Express for those who have it, but Panda
Sure.
Express is actually very traditional in some sense that it is like there are some parts, especially in the Guangdong province, Southeast China, Hong Kong, that people do eat portions of what Panda Express serves as
I
actual
mean,
Chinese
sure,
food.
yeah, like the fried chicken with
Yeah, fried
the sweet
rice,
sauce.
all that. Anyway, that's a
Yes.
whole different tangent. But going back to the Philly cheesesteak, now Wikipedia, trusted source here, of course, talked about, well, first of all, it's kind of like French fries, frites, right? Not French fries in
Mm-hmm.
France. Philly cheesesteak, it's not called the Philly cheesesteak in Philly. It's called the cheesesteak. And so
Right.
it's usually used with like ribeye, top round, thinly sliced, and not ground, kind of lightly, cooked on the griddle with a sandwich roll. And then also, this is the common fixings, sauteed onions, sweet hot peppers, mushroom, and then ketchup, salt, pepper, hot sauce. I've never had a Philly cheesesteak with hot sauce.
To be honest, at least through the sort of food documentaries that I've seen about like Philly cheesesteaks, And one I might recommend, and we can put this in the show notes, is right there's an episode of BA where Alex Delaney goes and eats like 16 Philly
Nice.
cheesesteaks in a day, um, and he rates all of the Philly cheesesteaks. But yeah, I kind of feel like from my impression, like true Philly cheesesteaks is pretty much just like beef and cheese and maybe some peppers
Yeah,
and
I
onions.
would I would say that. That's my kind of definition too, because everything else is like add-ons, and of course salt and pepper for sure, but like real Philly cheesesteak is close to a very a burger, right? You have your bun, or you have
Sure.
your roll, your cut steak, and then you have your onions, peppers, cheese. And then also there are some that uses cheese whiz, others use provolone or Swiss, kind of like.
So what's your take on it? Um I think there's kind of this mixed bag, right, when it comes to what makes a real Philly cheesesteak, right? Some say it has to be a cheese
Mhm.
sauce. It's not actual cheese,
Yeah.
right? And if you use actual cheese, you have to get it like kind of almost make a bechamel out of it and pour it onto the.
Yeah, look, now all I can say is I've been to Philly twice and had just street food Philly cheesesteak. I didn't go to like a back from the Benjamin Franklin days. Actually no, they would not have Philly cheesesteak then. But I went to the local like street food stand and got a Philly cheesesteak, or got a few, and it's it's the bread, the chopsticks, and then the sweet onions, or kind of like caramelized onions. I mean, not really fully caramelized. And then there are peppers, and the sauce. Both of them on two different occasions was a kind of a. It's not a bechamel, but I'm sure it's like melted provolone cheese. Twice,
Okay.
no cheese whiz. So that's my kind of
Hmm.
my go-to. I've had cheese whiz Philly cheesesteaks
Sure.
before, but it's a little bit more gummy in my opinion.
Yeah, I think it's again just kind of what everyone kind of likes on their own. I personally might go for the kind of more. I'm probably somewhere in the middle. Like I don't want it to be very distinctly cheese. Like I feel like there's some value. There's some kind of experience where the cheese is kind of ooey
Okay,
and
okay.
liquidy. But I don't know if I want like queso on my sandwich kind of thing.
Yeah, okay, fair enough. And yeah, it's it's hard to say. Well, I went to Philly and then I had a cheesesteak there. That must be the genuine Philly cheesesteak. It's the same thing as in, well, I went to Hong Kong and I had their like fried rice, and that means fried rice is for sure like very very authentic, right?
Yeah, even in Philly, there's a large debate over like what cheesesteak, what's the real
And I
Philly
think that's what
cheesesteak.
makes it good, right? That you can have varieties. You don't follow a very tried and true traditional pattern, like for Mother's Day, I make like duck l'orange, for my mom and my wife, and ultimately it's hard to stray away from it. I'm not saying you can't have variations, but then you really have to like stick to a certain preparation, method and whatnot. But it's limited in some ways in how you can enhance it, at least for the average cook. But then for a Philly cheesesteak or a burger or anything like that, you can like improvise, just based on the fixings you add or the condiments you add, which
Right.
opens up a huge window of how you can enjoy that entity.
Yeah, yeah, and it's kind of yeah, it's kind of understanding how things work, right? And this is part of like our conversation here because there is the aspect of it where if you deviate too much, maybe you're not actually making what you say you're
Right,
making anymore.
right. So what's next on your list of
Well, I would say the next we can talk about would be kind of a we could say like a cousin of the
okay,
Philly cheesesteak because the principle is actually pretty similar, which would be the Arby's
Okay,
roast beef sandwich.
so it's like a byproduct of the Reuben, the Philly cheesesteak, the deli sandwich in general.
Yeah, because to me, right, like Arby's roast beef sandwich kind of feels like, you know, the sloppy Joe of Philly
Okay,
cheesesteaks. In a sense of like I don't want to have to like cook all of this meat on the griddle too long. I have some cheese. I don't have a hoagie roll, so I just use a burger bun and then kind of slap it on
and I
kind of
mean,
thing.
truthfully, Arby's built their empire on this, kind of like this deli sandwich
Right.
hybrid of deli sandwich burger hybrid, right? So
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna give you my take. In general, I am not a huge fan of deli sandwiches, and let me qualify that. Any type of bread, Dutch crunch, like French baguette, sourdough, what have you. Okay, but deli meats where you have this hunk of meat, typically roasted, like roast beef, ham, turkey breast, for example, and then you slice it thinly about like a millimeter or so, each layer. I'm not a huge fan of that because I think to me, one, the browning is uneven. You can, for example, roast beef, you have that really thin band of, whatever crust was left, but then you don't get that crunch. So then mostly just tasting a slab, a literal slab of meat. That's one. And two, I think that well, I mean, I guess it's the same thing. That it's the texture of it as you're biting into it, it just feels like they're all the same. Like whether it's roast beef, ham, or turkey, you're biting into a deck of cards or the deck of, whatever, if you will.
Yeah, I think it's because everything's kind of broken down for you already. Like to me, of those the three major cold cuts, right? Of like roast beef, ham, and turkey, right? Roast beef would probably be the one that's like least
Yeah,
processed
okay.
in a sense, from regularity. Um, and the majority of the deli meats that we often eat are like these kind of injection molded blocks that then get
I
sliced,
hope
right?
in
In
a
which
real
case
del
you've
I hope
removed
in a
all of the
real deli
texture.
that is not, right? I've seen people with decent,
Sure.
like carved turkey, or even ham, like
Yeah,
spiral ham.
and I think, but like, yeah, but even with like a ham or a turkey, a lot of times, right, you're slicing it so thin that you remove a lot of that texture that you really like to get from, even if it is you're not a turkey breast person, but even that breast meat, like having the actual whole breast and then cooked and having that kind of
Yeah.
bite is a big part. So I'm totally with you on in terms of like deli cold cuts, right? And so for me, um, the other part of it is that because they are
Mm.
roasted, they generally don't have the seasoning doesn't really get through, right? And so all you really taste is kind of either bland meat or
Yeah,
salt
well,
water,
or actually the condiments, right? Typically, it's over mustard, over
right?
mayoed, that kind of thing.
Yeah, so for me, right, like if I were to think cold cuts, so that's why I've never really been an Arby's fan because when I think like cold cuts, there's only really like two or three types of cold cuts that I personally enjoy, which are like a tuna
Okay.
salad or kind of a like a tuna or a mixed
Okay.
salad kind of thing, um, or a
Mm.
cured meat like a salami or
Yeah,
type of
and,
thing.
and I appreciate all the deli folks that try to make our lives easier by cutting and slicing the meats, and it's, of course, salami, right? Salami, you do tend to have to slice it very thin, but
Hmm.
ultimately, yeah, the texture thing kills it for me. And so for Arby's, it's kind of the same way. Although Arby's tend to have a little bit more sauce flavor because it's trying to mimic that burger experience a little bit more. Um,
Yeah, though I'm gonna argue because Arby's doubles down on the roast beef thing, right? And so Arby's sauce
mhm.
is horseradish. So it's going very much that kind of roast beef prime rib sort of avenue as opposed to like a like a traditional burger. Like I personally probably would be very hard pressed to find a really good context to use a strong
Yeah.
horseradish on a
Well,
burger.
yeah. It's not it's going to be a little too pungent for the most part. And in terms of because like okay, so are you really biting into a burger? Are you really biting into kind of a you know prime rib dinner, right? So when you bite into Arby's
Hmm.
sandwich, I was gonna say burger for a second. When you bite into an Arby's sandwich, you typically, you finish off the bite on the bun, and then you have this like giant slab of like roast beef that you're biting into, and then that's all you taste, and that's kind of why it's not burgery
Yeah,
for
I'm
me.
not like it's always. I'll be honest. I've always kind of like regretted getting
I'm so
Arby's.
sorry. I
Like it
thought I
seems
thought
like
we
a
would
really
have a
good
sponsor by now. No, yeah.
I thought it was a good idea in my head, and then after I get it, it's not that it's like bad. It's just like, oh, it's a little disappointing. It's not quite what
Although
you
I,
thought
I
it
would
would be.
say local delis, you know, there's a few here, around our area, or at least a
Hmm.
kind of a local chain, Kinder's Barbecue, like really good. Very different. I mean, of course, you have your pulled pork, you have your hot links,
Sure,
that kind of
sure,
like
yeah,
towards that area uh, of deliing instead of the New York-ish style.
sure, sure, yeah. And I think each person has their own preferences. And so for me, like I just was never big on cold cold sandwiches.
Now let's go with something a little crazier. Now,
Okay.
donut burger. There's a KFC donut chicken sandwich where you have your donut, and then your fried chicken, and then your donut. But then there's also it's actually called the I haven't had it, but it's called Luther's Donut Burger, and it's a burger patty with all the fixings and all the condiments. But then
Hmm.
the bun is a donut. What's your take on that?
So where I first heard of this was actually I think on like some ESPN or sports channel
Hmm.
kind of special where this is kind of a big thing in AAA
Oh, okay.
baseball parks, like minor league ballparks. And so I think it was like a place in like Minnesota that does um, a, that does a Krispy
Yeah,
Kreme
and you mentioned
burger.
that before about the crispy creaminess of it.
Right.
But yeah, in general, donuts too. But
I personally, uh, I personally don't really get the whole like sweet and savory
mm,
kind of thing, like combination. I kind of get it in the sense of like I like the sweet with like a hint of savory, so like like caramel
hmm
with sea salt, or kind of like chocolate with peanuts,
okay,
that sort of thing. But like very heavy sweet and a very heavy savory, like I'm not sure I really get it. Like I'm kind of one of those guys. At like if I get like a breakfast platter, I don't really like it when my maple syrup gets on like
okay, okay.
everything.
Well, okay. So to reverse that would be a very very savory kind of flavor with a subtle like sweetness, like barbecue
Hmm.
sauce. That would be okay, but overly sweet,
Sure,
then yeah, not
sure.
so much. I get you there. However, what about and this is totally not burger territory, but since you were talking about sweet and savory, the staple of chicken and waffles. That is like the ultimate super savory with super sweet.
Sure. I like chicken and waffles, but I don't really like it that much, right? Like I like chicken and I like waffles, and so for me it was like the sense of like I don't know if I really appreciate like chicken and waffles the dish. Like I might, you know, to me, right? Like there's a part of me that would rather have like, a chicken fried steak with a side of
Okay.
waffles
Okay, fair enough.
kind of thing.
Heresy. But so donut burger, nay. And yeah, I would see that it's since the donut is a little bit more a good donut will be more flaky, and there's that little extra soft and pillowy texture to it. It just doesn't it doesn't go well with, say, a burger bun, let alone the this overly over the top sweetness of it, right?
Yeah, I think like for me, it's also one of those texture things, right? Like the way a Krispy Kreme kind of dissolves in your mouth, and then mixing in like ground beef and bacon with that is just not like super appealing. Now I know there's a lot of people that are like really
Mm,
into that sort of thing. You know, the bacon donut, the bacon maple donut is like one of the number
yeah,
one selling donuts at Voodoo Donuts in Portland.
yeah.
But yeah, it's just not really
Yeah,
my
you know,
thing.
and ultimately, where do you draw the line, right? That okay, so you have your donut, maybe a plain kind of donut for your bun. Okay, fine. Then you have your glazed donut. Okay, maybe. Then you have your chocolate donut, jelly filled donut.
Yeah, it's oh,
So
definitely not.
that's kind of the
Yeah,
slippery
it's
slope kind of thing.
tough. Yeah, you know, there's a thing that my friends tried last time I was in Hawaii, which was a long time ago, where there's a very popular thing in Hawaii called
Mm-hmm.
Malasadas, and so we were having a barbecue, and another one of the big things in Hawaii for a barbecue, if you buy those pre-made burgers, is they have like kind of this like teriyaki smoked kind of flavor, almost like char
Okay.
siu
Yep.
kind of burger. And one of my friends had this brilliant idea of like putting that onto a
Right.
malasada,
Effectively, it's a
and
donut burger. You know, and like, since malasada is
right, and so
a Portuguese, you know, flaky donut, so the donut burger.
right. So yeah, it's just not really like, and so he was like, "This is amazing," and it's sort of like, I don't feel like I'm eating a burger anymore. It's one of those kind of almost like Panda Express things. Like I kind of have to
So
think of it
unfortunately,
not as
that's
a
not an
burger
honorable
in order to
mention.
maybe enjoy it.
It's actually going downhill. But I get it. You know, the whole donut burger part was like what is not
Sure.
good. Funny you mentioned that, because you know, right here I have on my notes where there's the L&L Hawaiian barbecue. They have a ramen, or what they call a saimin burger, and
Uh-huh.
it's a, and we kind of talked about this in the bun episode, but instead of rice, it's more of a instant noodle looking uh, bun bun vehicle for the burger. And again, the burger is also with like teriyaki sauce or teriyaki like sauce as well.
Right. Right. Um, yeah, I think you're just kind of playing with different things, and so to me, something like that is more of a it's probably more of a riff on another that I would say L&L has, that's another sort of burger adjacent dish that definitely isn't a burger, which
Right.
is Loco Moco, which is a play on the Japanese hamburger steak, right? Japanese the Japanese, they have a dish, and uh, L&L has it too, but the Japanese have a dish where it's basically a hamburger patty served in this kind of like demi
Mm-hmm.
glace over rice. And a loco moco is basically that, except instead of a nice demi glace, it's basically just brown gravy, and they put two sunny side eggs on top. And so, like for me, like that's actually like if I have extra beef and extra burger patties, right? Like, and I don't have enough buns, like that's actually a very good go-to for me because you just create a bed of rice, that sort of thing. But yeah, it's very much not like a
Yeah.
burger,
Yeah, I
and
mean, you let's say you
you're
ran,
not
like, for
going
some
for the
reason,
burger.
again, if you're buying like store bought, you know, store bought like frozen patties, or if you make, you know, your burger patties from ground beef, and you made like 10, you know, burger patties, but then you only have 8 buns, then you have
Hmm.
2 burger patties left, and of course you can run to the store and get more. But then again, you keep on having this like imbalanced ratio between your patties and your buns.
Right, right, yeah.
Then what do you do with your patties, right? So the and again, funny Jonas will say this, because the next one on the list is actually the Hamburg steak, which is a German
Right.
traditional, which the Japanese variant of that was what you mentioned. The Hamburg steak is kind of like the proto burger, right? You have that the Hamburg steak patty, you know, on your dish, but there's no bun, no vehicle for it.
Right. And the very similar kind of tangential thing, we kind of mentioned this in passing when we talked about Moss Burger, is it's kind of like a
Hmm.
Salisbury steak, right? And you get the sauce, you get the onions, and typically a Salisbury steak is, served with, vegetables or like
Right.
potatoes kind of
Right.
thing.
So yeah, again, since we're deviating a lot from the burger adjacents, because when we talk about a burger, we typically say, okay, at the very least, it's bun patty bun. Then it's a
Right.
patty but no bun, right? Just as in it's a bun but no
Yeah.
patty. Then what is it? Yeah.
Right.
So
Y-
no, I guess that's way too far off from a burger.
Sure. Okay. What do we have that kind of brings us back towards more the burger realm?
I don't want to steal the show, but I do have one more. What
Sure.
about a hot dog? Ooh.
Okay. This is getting into kind of shady waters here. Um, yeah, so that's very interesting because I would argue if you're going to talk hot dogs, then um, we kind of might want to go. There's another food item that I would probably bring up as being about as close as
But
hot
think about it
dogs.
though. I mean, give
Um,
hot dogs a chance because if you think about it, again,
sure,
the same ingredient, all beef franks. Okay, fine. Let's qualify that. You
sure,
have your
sure,
bun like
sure.
quality, even though it's in an elongated shape, right? And then you have your
Yeah.
ground,
Um,
crushed meat,
yeah, so I think for me, right, it's again one of those texture things. It's
the
the
casing. Yeah.
snap that I look for in a hot dog. Yeah, is not really what I consider in like a burger. And so for me, a hot dog would probably be closer. Like it's maybe somewhere between from like our conversation, right? It's maybe somewhere between like a Philly cheesesteak and a burger
I the
in
the
a
only
certain
way I would
sense.
disagree with that is that a hot dog needs to have its own category, because it's the
Sure.
the the hot dog is the hot dog itself is such a unique kind of thing. Although I guess you can do Italian
Yeah.
sausage ish, like, which is less of a casing, no casing, and it's just kind of the ground meats kind of like crushed together. Then again, that line blurs again.
Yeah, I think for me because I've seen the kind of variations I've seen on hot dogs tend to lean further away from burger than kind of closer to, right? Because the traditional hot dog is probably the closest you're going to get to a burger, right? Like when I say traditional hot dog, I'm not talking like the loaded everything on top of it New York style hot dog, though that might be kind of, or Chicago style, right? Like but that might be kind of close because you're putting like onions and relish and all that stuff. But like the traditional kind of
Hmm.
backyard hot dog that you have with the traditional backyard burger, which is like bun, meat, ketchup, mustard, go, right? Uh, is like I feel like that's as close as you're gonna get, and that's still not like super close. But everything else is less close, is further off, right? So like one of the things that I see is like with that is like it's using kind of it's like meat alternatives, right? Are easier to use in hot dogs, I would argue, than it is to use in like a burger.
Define what do you mean by that?
So the thing I think of most distinctly is actually is actually this thing I picked up from an anime of all places. It's an anime about baking bread, and basically there's in and this can be done in real life. It's a lot of work, but it can be done. Is the episode was they were tasked to make yakisoba pan, right? Yakisoba bread, which is this Japanese bread with fried noodles inside of it,
Okay. Yep.
basically. And so one of the iterations of that they made was basically they threaded the noodles into essentially like a hot dog. Like they made a casing with noodles and like fried noodles inside of it, and they put it on a hot dog. And if you the rationale behind of it, and again, this is anime, so I don't know how realistic it is, though. Sometimes they're pretty good. Is that he did that because they came from a poor family, they didn't have a lot of meat, and by doing this, they could kind of trick the kids into thinking like they were getting more meat than they actually were.
That's a little sad in a little bit, but I see what you're saying.
Sure, but like so for me, right? Like when I think of like hot dog, like that's one connection that I have. But to me, a yakisoba pan is very very far from
Yeah,
a
of course, right? You have your carb over carb over carb, but yeah, I mean, it's going back to the whole category. Hot dog is its own category. Ultimately, I think a burger really is its own category too. And again, we talked about it, of course, like 9 episodes deep, 10 episodes actually, into like what a burger is, what's a good burger. We still have a lot to talk about for sure. About the burger. But at the same time, maybe it's a good pivot that, hey, what about other things in life that may be related to burgers, maybe not. I think that's, or also other videos that talk about burger preparations, or like pitting the actual Impossible Burger with a real burger. I think those are worth exploring down the line.
Yeah. Right. We talked about hot dogs. Maybe next time we'll talk
Yeah.
about tacos.
Oh, tacos. Tacos is a good one. I mean, if you think about it, the flour tortilla taco, which I know true taco fans, that's not a real taco, but nonetheless, like your flour tortilla tacos, it's kind of the same ingredients too. You have your bread, you have your ground beef, right?
Though there's a certain argument I could make that maybe tacos are more like hot dogs.
Or maybe like Sloppy Joe's. So yeah, a slippery slope for sure.
Yep. So yeah, definitely we want to hear from you guys, right? And this is just kind of us figuring out like what's a burger, what's not a burger, and we kind of come full circle in that sense. But we want to hear from you guys, like what are maybe some burger adjacent things that you like that maybe we should check out and try. What sort of content do you want to see? Maybe one of these days, yeah, we'll do the Beyond versus Beef.
We will do that
argument and settle
yeah,
that once and for
but
all.
of course, if you finish watching this and you're like royally confused about like what are you talking about condiments and buns and everything, hey, check out the prior 10 episodes, from 1 to 10, and we break it down from bun to bun. That's what we do. So like you really have a lot of information about the burger that you never could have imagined, right?
Yeah. Moral of the story: go make some burgers.
No,
and enjoy.
moral story is to click the subscribe button and also the little bell icon, and also subscribe to our podcast. But that's gonna help us.
We can have more than one
fine.
moral.
Multiple morals of the story is, hey, enjoy the burger. It deserves a little pedestal on the altar, all by itself. Heresy. So again, subscribe, click the bell icon. Yep.
Let us know what you
think.
think.
We will see you. We will see you next time.